pretty standard routine stuff for those of you who have had an eye exam. So he says, this is what you're seeing with your old lens, click. This is what you're seeing today, click. And which one do you prefer, A or B? And I actually, at this point, I really wasn't listening to the way he framed this part. I was kind of just caught up in this sensorial experience of, you know, the ocular contrast and just enjoying some of the visual exercise of it all. So after the final assessment was complete, I said, wait, so you were showing me the vision in my old glasses first, and then now you're showing me what I'm actually going to be able to see out of these new glasses that I get, right? And he's like, yes. And my mind was just blown. As many times as I've really had this experience, it was something that just stood out to me about that. I was actually perplexed for a little while and spent a great deal of time after I had gotten my glasses, kind of going back and forth between the old lenses and the new. And I'm like, my kids are like, what's going on? Like she's, but I was fascinated by it. And I'm thinking, man, how have I been getting by? Like, I mean, I've been out and about, I've been driving, all types of things. So now I'm thinking, well, what's been missing? What have I missed? What was at risk? I've been behind the wheel on the expressway. And I also couldn't help but make the connection between this experience and what happens, particularly in this equity, anti-bias, anti-racist work, when those lenses begin to get tweaked, right? And when we think we know things, and then we realize we really didn't know that thing at all. Thinking along those lines ultimately has helped me to prepare for this talk. So here is a quote from Helen Keller. She said, the only thing worse than being blind is having sight, but no vision. I mean, this is a pretty deep quote. This is deep to me. It's a very thought-provoking statement for sure. It's kind of like that moment when I realized that my sight had actually been extremely poor for like a couple years, because I'd had those glasses for a while. And I'm thinking, you mean to tell me that all this time I've been struggling to see and I didn't even realize it? On the other hand, though, I also kind of felt like a superhero with these new glasses. These are the glasses. Kind of like Storm flying through Wakanda, because I had this new sight, this new vision. With these new really cool red frames, I imagine myself walking with this power of heightened laser sharp X-ray vision. But I am someone with eyesight privilege. And even though my eyesight is dwindling just a bit, I do understand that I have a level of privilege. And I'm actually now a card-carrying member of the Bifocal Club. But nonetheless, the reality is I do have sight. And what a waste it would be if I didn't stretch myself to have vision. And not only just have vision, but to have a vision that's grounded in truth and reciprocity, in balance, in harmony. So if you happen to know anything about the Kemetic or Egyptian goddess Maat, she represents truth, justice, reciprocity, harmony, and balance. And my name means just that. It serves as a reminder to me. It's like a blueprint, like a roadmap, helping me to be able to navigate towards actualizing peace and justice within my sphere of influence. Now, before we delve deeper into this talk, as a trained Montessori elementary educator, of course, we're going to have to look at a few words. Those two words, to be exact, those two words. So let's look at these words that we have. We have critical. Critical can actually be defined as having the potential to become disastrous. It's critical. Critical being also meaning at a point of crisis. Paulo Freire, an educator, social activist, and he's also the author of Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And I'm thinking he coined the term critical consciousness. He described it as an intervention in reality to intervene in reality in order to change it. The process of identifying contradictions and experience through dialogue and becoming part of the process of change in the world. Very exciting. I love the idea of this. And I like to think that this is essentially what we're all striving towards. We want to intervene, change the world for the better. And one part of being able to do that is understanding what the reality is, right? You know, so if we have this skewed sense of reality, then herein lies the point of anti-bias, anti-racist work. If we can ground ourselves spiritually, at a spirit level in that work, take that out into every single thing that we do, able to really experience and see the reality of the situations that we're in. And this is where we emphasize understanding the socio-political context. So anyway, here we have absence. And we know absence is when something is not present. But then when we add critical, right, we say critical absence, then there's a intentionality behind this absence. So what am I saying is missing? Because I'm saying something's missing, it's in my title. I'm saying that there's something missing, and that something is justice. So let's look at justice. Let's think about justice in this way. Let's see. There we go. Let's think about justice in this way, because one thing with elementary students every year, this is how we always start with defining justice. It's just a part of what we do. We define justice, we illustrate justice, we give living examples of justice, and really work and strive to live that out as a community, as a principle. My goal as the teacher is to ritualize the experience of justice. So imagine justice as a state of being in which everyone gets what they need, and those that need the most are getting the most help, period. That's it. That's the definition. Let's just leave it there. But when there's a bias, when we happen to have a bias towards ourselves, that often leads to a bias against others. And this is how we see that justice actually begins within ourselves. Like, our physical bodies are actually great examples of justice. If you think about your physical body, it's a system. You have a muscular system, you have a skeletal system, and these are all systems that are based in justice. If there happens to be an injury to your body is going to respond to that injury. And there are actually some functions that may render themselves useless, or maybe not even useless, but the things will stop and everything is going to move towards that site of injury or trauma. And that happens in real life. I'm not saying it in the most articulate or specific way, but it happens. So even our bodies, we can look to our bodies. We can look to nature to be able to see all of the things around us, how there is this divine intelligence. That divine intelligence is all aligned to seek out harmony and to maintain justice. It's fascinating. There are so many things around us that essentially are supporting us in this work, and that's really the point. So justice is important for each of us in our personal lives, in our professional lives. It also becomes strikingly important when we think of those in positions of power. And that's basically us. Let's just say it's us right now. We hold, everybody here in this Zoom room, we hold power in different ways, different times, right? But now when you have power and whatever positions of power that you hold, being able to enact justice from that vantage, from that space, is how we actually achieve momentum and positive this work. It's interesting to really think about this. So let's do that. Now that we've defined a few words, few terms, let's go back. We're going to contemplate the power that we possess within our spirit. influence. And in this particular space, I'm actually speaking about the realm of research. Let's see what's on this next slide. There we go. Let's think a minute about that influence that research actually has on the individual psyche, the psychic integrity of children, the influence that research can have on the physical body. For instance, through research, we make decisions about whether the best foods to eat. We make decisions about what medicine we might take to protect ourselves from a virus. The influence that research has on families, on group behavior, it influences group dynamics and whole societies. If we have more time today, I would ask us to really look at America's history of scientific research. Everything from the unethical, vicious medical protocols to the disempowering and racist legacy of IQ and standardized testing. Needless to say, if we did have time to go down that road, we would see that the field of research is a peculiar institution that can at the very least fuel racist thinking and ideas. Researchers hold a great deal of power, and their work informs policies, their work creates opportunities, it validates human behaviors, it justifies critical decisions that affect us all. Over the next 2 days, today and tomorrow, we're gonna have an opportunity that I'm super excited about, and that this opportunity will be for us to be able to learn from researchers who are specifically looking at Montessori in the context of anti-racist pedagogy, equity issues and measurements and design, and where racial equity exists within admissions and research participation. I would like for us all to be very clear about the fact that we have the power and ability to liberate, and at the same time, the ability to cause repression, to perpetuate harm, to give rise to erasure, an erasure of culture, of personal narratives, an erasure of people. It's our responsibility to choose every day where we stand. We don't get to just go to a conference and then leave and say, oh, I got it. I'm now an ally. I'm now an AERA educator. We don't get to go to a training and say, oh, I got it. I'm now a culturally responsive, culturally competent researcher. It's not something that you can just say. It's not something that we just speak into existence. It's something, this work is something that you live, and it's a choice that you make every single day. I also want us to consider how when we give some of our power away, we can all wind up with more, and that is justice. Okay, so let's put this power into perspective. Let's go back to the word critical. Let's go back. So when we're at a point of crisis, and we have been for a very long time, but we're at a point of crisis, right? Which is ultimately due to a lack of justice. Then it's my understanding, and from my perspective, when you're in that state, every human, every living thing, living being must consciously commit to its restoration. And this can and must be done in all areas of people activity, for the mere fact that inequities actually prop up every system that's been devised by people in our society. So when I say people in every area of people activity, whether it's the system of that of medicine, a healthcare system, juvenile justice system, media and entertainment, the system of the educational system, the field of educational research, we address this critical absence of justice by looking at our own selves and work, no matter where we are, in anything that we're doing. If we strive to for our goal to be maintaining justice, think about how powerful a movement that would be. Now, a great example of like the ultimate in creativity, an example of a human that was committed to justice is Gordon Parks. And this is the image of Gordon Parks. One of my, like, he's just a person that, I just like Gordon Parks. Gordon Parks grew from being a self-taught portrait photographer and photojournalist to becoming the very first Black photographer at Life magazine in 1949. He's also known for his beautiful imagery. And really for me, this is a moment because I have grown up with Gordon Parks' photography, and his artistry certainly left a deep impression on me. I remember at Granny's house that we had this set of encyclopedias. It was called the Ebony Pictorial History of Black America. I think there's like maybe 5 volumes. It's like these like chocolate brown books, these huge books that just were on our shelves. And I want to say this really quickly. There was a time where I did, I was reading, it was like early on in my Montessori training, and I was reading all this research about reading and how, children who are read to for 20 minutes a day and how, better off they are. And this is backed by research, right? So I wanted to use that in this talk that I was giving. This was like 6-7 years ago. And so as a part of me preparing for this talk, I wanted to think of some children's books that had been read to me and just kind of, make some tie-ins. And so I was thinking, and I kept trying to think about a book, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't remember a book being read to me. And so I stopped and I'm like, surely somebody read me a book when I was little. And then I just kept going back to Granny's house, and I'm thinking, I don't remember seeing books, not children's books. I remember seeing those ebony encyclopedias. I saw Jet magazines, and I saw ebony magazines. I saw recipes. There was writing, I was reading, but I did not see a book. And I confirmed it with my mom one day. I sent her a text and I was like, Mom, what books did you read to me when I was little? And I was like, well, I don't want you to feel some way. I'm asking, but I'm just kind of preparing for this speech. And so she told me, she was like, I didn't read books to you. And I just thought that was fascinating. And I wanted to just kind of say that because when there are times when you can look at research, you can read research and see where it's set up, where in that particular research and the way that I read it, it could have other people thinking that, man, maybe something is wrong, or there's some type of deficit when a child is not being read to, when a child doesn't have a library. No one's telling them bedtime stories, but what is it that they are getting? And so it's really about us shifting our lens and our perspective as researchers. So anyway, I remember as a child, I kind of digress. I remember as a child just looking through these images in these books, right, at Granny's house, looking at myself being reflected in Jet magazines, ebony magazines. The visual storytelling was extremely compelling and it shaped me. Gordon Parks, he's known for capturing the humanity of a dispossessed, disenfranchised people. He did this by exploring the social and economic impact of poverty and racism and other forms of discrimination. And so I found this quote, which I love. He says, I saw that the camera could be a weapon against poverty, against racism, against all of social wrongs. And I do want to add that there was also another piece of a quote where he said, I saw the camera could be a weapon against all of the things that I disliked about America. And then he says, and I knew at that point I had to have a camera. So of course, we think about, well, for me, I started going there like, oh, wow, the camera, he used it as a weapon. Dr. Montessori says we can use education as a weapon for peace. I would like to encourage us all to consider this conference as an intentional space for educational researchers to sharpen their tools, to choose their weapons, to ensure justice and liberation as researchers committed to racial equity. We want to see every aspect of our work as a tool for justice. Our independent variables, like our tools of measurement, the research sample, right? Our just everything that all of those components. My hope is that this is one, and essentially that I just want to share that every aspect of the research process is like a cell. It's like a cell in the body. And that's how we should be approaching our work. Every aspect of it should be doing and moving towards the same goal. Just like the cells in our body, when there's that, that site of injury or harm that's been done, cells move into that space to restore balance. So every piece of the research process should be ready to move into finding where we can find justice and bringing out the truth in the work that we're doing. Now, another thing that's deep about Gordon Parks, one more thing, is that he's known for his use of careful, dramatic lighting that captures the charisma of his subject. Through his eye, through his degree of sight and vision, he could remove a figure from the everyday image of oppression. And I'm hoping if you haven't looked at his work that you would be interested maybe in looking at some of his photography. He made folks see the humanity in a Black janitor, for instance, the humanity in two little girls playing jumping rope in an alley. During this time, he incited a revolutionary view of everyday Black life. He took images and represented Black and brown people in their neighborhoods, in the streets, in their homes, at their dinner tables, in their places of worship. He humanized us. And remember, these were people, and this was a time where they weren't even considered human, or well, at the time, they were only recently seen as full human beings. So as researchers, we too must consider our own perspectives. How are we seeing our subjects? Widening our aperture. An aperture is an opening. And this is the opening through which light travels. And we can see this in optics and in the world of photography as well. Now, our natural aperture is actually found in our eyes. The pupil is our eye's aperture, and it opens and closes to adjust the light so that we're able to see more clearly under certain circumstances. And the camera's aperture functions in the same way, letting in more light to be able to bring and images clear and in balance and in focus. And that's what Gordon Parks was a master at doing. In Zaretta Hammond's book, The Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, this is where I first heard the term aperture being used in the context of how we're seeing our students. As an educator herself, she challenges us to widen our interpretation aperture. When I think about that term, our interpretation aperture. Okay, so imagine a door. And on the other side of that door, there's a huge field of beautiful, fragrant red roses. This door is only slightly open though, like really just slightly open. So you can peek through that door and you might be able to get a glimpse of something red for sure, but you might not be able to make out what it actually is. Likely you're not. You can make assumptions. You can write articles. You can develop theories about what that red thing is. You can profess to know exactly what's on the other side, but in reality, you only have a very small slice, a small slither of insight into what the full picture actually holds. And when we talk about widening our interpretation aperture, this is the idea that we can actually apply to, it's an idea that we can apply to our research. And it's really asking us to interpret our observation and interrupt our observation practices. It's asking us to interrogate the ways in which we describe our subjects, in the ways in which we evaluate, think we see. When we go on site visits, for example, to schools, how are we describing the home lives of the children that we're engaged in with? How are we relating to their family structures? The words and terms we use must be interrogated for sure. When we're writing these evaluations and final thoughts and reflections from our work, because language can easily become sites of domination. American poet and activist Adrienne Rich, she wrote, "I know that it is not the English language that hurts me, but what the oppressors do with it, how they shape it to become a territory that limits and defines how they make it a weapon that can shame, humiliate, and colonize." It's something to think about. And in closing, I want to share that we all need to open those doors that are within our spheres of influence, open those doors that are closed and just slightly open in our hearts and in our minds, so that we can let in alternative explanations, expressions, and shades of humanity. As we prepare ourselves for 2 days of critical dialogue and sharing, my question to you, well, actually I have 3 questions. It's probably more than that. It's like 3 questions with little sub questions. So here are some questions for you to just help, maybe to help ground your time during this conference. What are you capturing? Whose voice is not being heard here? So for anyone who's ever been in any session that I've ever done with teachers, I always give them, because teachers are like, what do I need to do? This work is what do I do? Go into your classroom, I always say, get out your album, get out that lesson. And before you give any lesson, write 4 questions at the top of that piece of paper. Whose voice is not being heard? Who is being silenced? Why is this happening? And how is this happening? So I always say that. So what I want to do is ask these framing questions for you today. So what are you capturing? Whose voice is not being heard here? What are you bringing to the surface? Who is being silenced? And how are you framing it? Many things have been framed in unjust ways. And it's time for us to consider how, through our passions, through our talents, and through our commitment to justice, we can actually search for and discover something new. There are creative possibilities, creative revolutionary possibilities that lie within each of us. As Montessori educators and researchers, we owe it to our students to craft out sites of resistance and liberation for them. At the core of everything we do, the energy that is held and that is that should be felt from children should be words that are saying, I can't wait to see the world through your eyes. Anything that I say, anything that I'm, any lesson that I'm given, that's the energy that I should be really sharing with and expressing to my students. I can't wait to see what you capture and what you're going to bring light to, what type of light you're going to bring to this world. And really letting them know that we are willing to pave the way and we're also willing to get out of the way and let them shine. I want to thank you for your time. I want to just end with this quote, because this is, I feel like anytime we get together to do the work of, empowering and bettering our Montessori pedagogy, that, it's nice to end with this quote. From The Secret of Childhood. And here, as in other battles, we soon find that our individual efforts have need of the help of others. We have to come together, and that's what we're doing. Those who share the same defects instinctively assist each other, finding strength in their union. Thank you for your time, and please feel free to reach out.